So series, it's cybersecurity headlines.
What happens when hackers don't pay their suppliers? Well, they go to hackers' court. Salesforce is blaming its crash on a sole employee. And do bug bounties actually help security, or is this the Cobra effect all over again? Well, these are some of the stories that my colleagues and I have been bringing to you on this week's Cybersecurity Headlines podcast. And now we're going to get a chance for some insight, some opinion, and some expertise on these stories and more from our guest, who this week is Jimmy Sanders, who is CISO of Netflix DVD. Jimmy, welcome to the show.
Hey, it's great to be here with everybody. Thanks for having me.
Well, it's fantastic. Thank you so much. So we're going to get into some stories right away here, but I just want to remind everyone before we start here that our sponsor this week is Sumo Logic. And if you are joining us live, please join us over on Crowdcast and share your comments and some thoughts. We love to hear what you have to say, and we can even acknowledge some of them on the show if we can. So, Jimmy, we've got just about 20 minutes now to talk about a few things that we've been covering on the Cybersecurity Headlines podcast. Number one here is that the Air India hack. Indian companies have been having a hard time recently with some of their breach issues. And this is a hack that covers 10 years and at least 3 other airlines in terms of not actually being attributed to Air India specifically. It was actually directed at CETA, which is a passenger service system based in Geneva. It happened in February, and it gave attackers access to about 10 years worth of data, including names and passport and credit card information from Air India, Singapore Airlines, New Zealand Air, and Lufthansa, which is about 4.5 million people. Now, my question to you is this. CETA disclosed this 3 months ago, but Air India only disclosed this just very recently, which is a question to me in terms of you've got a kind of a supply chain going on here. You've got a hub, basically, with CETA at the center. Do you think that, in general, hub organizations like this should have an obligation to maybe push some of its slower members into full disclosure? I mean, should they be owning this problem a little bit more?
Yes, they should be owning the problem more, but it all just depends on your contractual obligations and your legal requirements. India may have a totally different disclosure policy than, let's say, New Zealand or Switzerland, or Geneva. So that's a touchy subject. But if you're the consumer, you want to know as soon as possible.
Indeed, yes, absolutely. So perhaps even if it's not entirely litigious or within the actual legal systems, perhaps a professional moral obligation to push. Maybe they did. I know that
I have yet to see a professional moral obligation actually bear fruit. When I hear professional, I hear make money.
Okay, right on. So, so we've got a substantial conflict of interest perhaps going on here. And I mean, it may indeed be that they were trying. I know that Air India is having some challenges financially as well. But it just seems to be that when you've got this, we're seeing more and more, of course, the interrelationship with companies, with organizations, just like in the supply chain, just like the infrastructure we have with oil and electricity. They're not islands. And so maybe there is some moral obligation, some moral requirement to do that. So we shall see, of course. Here's another one which I think is quite fascinating in terms of the evolution of our industry. That DarkSide is getting taken to hackers' court for not paying its affiliates. Now, DarkSide is known, of course, for being responsible, suspected anyway, for the Colonial Pipeline attack. But some of the people who've been working for them are not getting paid. And so they've taken DarkSide to a hackers' court, a kind of a people's court for organizations, where they're not necessarily suing for compensation monetarily wise, but perhaps putting the organization's reputation on the line to maybe stop them from getting other good business. So to me, this puts the organized in organized crime. So do you think we're entering an age now where this kind of thing is going to maybe bleed out? For example, insurance companies are going to now rate their insurance coverage based on the ratings of the cybercriminal organizations. Are we seeing sort of an increasing sophistication on the dark side of our business?
I don't think we're seeing an increasing sophistication. I think we see a more illuminating side of the dark side of the security realm. There's been organized underground hacking ever since the frack days of the 1980s, early 90s. Right. We just didn't get illuminated about it because we were kept out of that environment. But now that you have nation state attackers that are getting publicly endorsed by their nations, it's gaining more visibility.
It's incredible. It's fascinating. So let's look at one that we've known for many years as a staple of our industry, which is Salesforce. They had a crash earlier this month, which they ended up blaming a sole employee for using an emergency patch. Now, the backstory for this is that they were doing an update, DNS configuration change, and this individual, who I believe was based in Australia, rather than using a staggered rollout, he or she decided to shortcut the normal procedures by using an emergency break fix, which required that the DNS servers themselves get restarted, but they were actually needed for the rollout. So they got into a circular dependency, which took a while to fix. Now, the organization said, we're back up and we have taken the appropriate action with the employee. So obviously, Jimmy, people do make mistakes, but is this, forgive my ignorance perhaps on this, but should there not be greater safety protocols for something this large? Microsoft does this. They all have some little slips once in a while. Google pushes out things. But this seemed pretty big. Does this sound like just throwing the intern under the bus, or is this the normal risk of upgrades?
It definitely sounds like you're throwing the intern under the bus. Who orchestrated this environment to not allow layers of controls that would mitigate against this circumstance? If you didn't gamify this, or you didn't do threat models behind this, it's not the intern's fault. It's like security always blaming the end user when we make a mistake in building our security protocols.
Yeah, and it may not have exactly been an intern this time. However, I'm just thinking back to SolarWinds. These things do get mentioned that time. It's just very easy to do that. Now, Salesforce is highly respected as an organization, and it's much, much bigger than the CRM that it used to be. So maybe live and learn, but it just seems to be an eyebrow raiser given how much importance Salesforce has on the global infrastructure.
And I have the utmost respect for the Salesforce security team and the way they develop things. Mm-hmm. But to think that a single entity can take down an entire billion-dollar organization is a little far-fetched.
Yeah, it really is a little scary, because even if it's just for a few hours, there's a lot of stuff that happens in that time. Just wanted to also acknowledge a comment coming in as we're working here together. David Beach is raising an eyebrow or two about why criminals in the dark side are not honoring their contractual obligations. Hey, who knew? Very good comment, absolutely. But
that is a good comment. But the way it works for every industry that you're in is you're peer reviewed, so you get recommended based on your consistent behavior. Whether you're a criminal or you're a good person, you won't get references for future contracts. So if you only want to make that one pop that they did, let's say the Colonial Pipeline, then that's good for them, and they'll never get references again.
Yeah, but it's we had this discussion actually last week. Honor among thieves. This is a business, and one of our headlines from today was talking about, oh my goodness, which one was it? That's just made $1 billion, I think it was, last year. In terms of DarkSide type business, it's a very profitable business. You've got good people running it, and you've got smart people organizing it. So yeah, I would expect some degree of this kind of rating system going on. So once in a while, we encounter a story which is again just about the bumping up basically between countries and big social. And we've got another one right now, which is that Russia has been threatening to slow and throttle Google. It did this with Twitter a while back after Twitter refused to delete some banned content, and now it's threatening some action against Google. This is what it construes to be illegal information, and saying that Google could also be fined up to 10% of the company's total annual revenue for repeat violation. I'm not quite sure if that's just the Russian revenue or its global revenue. But Russia basically wants to turn the screws here on Google for information that it doesn't like. And again, we've seen this with India and other countries as well. So we're seeing social media giants butting up against nation governments. So who benefits more? If you think about it from your experience perspective, who is the main beneficiary? Does a country benefit better from having a thriving social media, or does social media benefit from having access to a country's people, or is it sort of a half and half type deal?
I would say social media benefits, because social media, without our consent, has been scraping our data, using it to profile us, doing things of that nature, where governments may be looking out for our best interests. Well, in this case, they may or may not be looking out for our best interests, but it will definitely hurt social media than it will a country like a Russia or India.
Okay, so we do have a clear side, a clear winner then. Okay, very cool.
Not a clear winner, but you have, because you're your own sovereign entity, you're able to dictate the controls that happen within your borders.
Mm-hmm. Right. So that is the being sovereign in full scope of the term. It's just very. It seems to be continuing to grow in terms of the butting heads of what once there was an innocent time when Facebook was just simply Facebook, and now these are organizations that have enormous power, and so again we're seeing these things grow. So let's talk
What I'm seeing is the more money you see things make, the more you want to see governments get involved. When the internet was still in its infancy, nobody heard about taxes on goods and things. But as soon as it became $1 billion, $1 trillion industry, oh, government perks up.
Right, right. Yes, well, that does sound like par for the course for them. Very cool. Let's take a moment here to have a look at our sponsor for this week, which is Sumo Logic. Sumo Logic. It is time to rethink your security for digital transformation success. So why not register for Sumo Logic's Modern SOC Summit, which is happening June 8th and 9th, to debate, discuss, and share best practices for modernizing security operations for the rapidly evolving threat landscape. Reserve your spot for this virtual event at sumologic.com and click on the top of the screen and all the details are there. So, we are back. DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, is to issue its first ever cybersecurity regulations for the pipeline industry after the Colonial hack. This is something that is beginnings of a regulation in cybersecurity in this industry for the first time, and perhaps it might expand into other infrastructure industries as well. It's going to require pipeline companies to report cyber incidents back to federal authorities, and there'll be some mandatory rules as to how pipeline companies must safeguard their systems against cyber attacks. Now, question once again. This puts sort of a kind of a political spin on here because we've got obviously a Democrat-led administration face-to-face with an industry that has benefited greatly from years of assistance basically with previous administrations that were oil-friendly and resistance to regulation. So do you think that this particular initiative is going to have any long-term teeth, or might the organizations kind of just tread water until the next election, whatever happens there?
Unfortunately, I don't think it'll have long-term teeth, and it has a bad peripheral appearance to it, because to single out an individual industry instead of coming out with a comprehensive guideline for all critical infrastructure, instead of just saying the pipeline industry, it would have looked a lot better if they would have said critical infrastructure, here's the rules of engagement.
Yeah, and that's obviously a very, very large area to work with. And so with this, again, being a federal initiative, how much power might it have on a state level? I mean, does it always automatically overrule any state initiatives, or is this going to be 50/51 different opinions playing out?
This is a legal battle because, as you said before, it was initiated by a Democratic elected federal government. But you may have a Republican state government that says, nope, we're protecting our oil industry, we're protecting our pipelines, we will sue to block these rules. So to me, this is set up for a perfect court battle.
Yeah, which that's what it sounded like to me. Is that the idea is wonderful, and I'd love to see it, just simply because we're getting very sobered up as to the nature of the connectivity of these kinds of infrastructure applications. You know, one goes down like Colonial did, and you sort of close down the eastern seaboard for a few days.
But we've been arguing about this for the last 20 years. The ICS, industrial complex, and all of the interconnected systems. We've been talking about this for years, and for it to be bearing fruit now, it's almost like when we were warning about a pandemic effect, and then COVID hit. It's like shout in the wind for these type of things.
It's a huge challenge, absolutely, and you've got a lot of people, again, with vested interests, politically or financially, that are going to fight this or push it. I'm getting a comment here from Rick Woodward. Just want to read it here. I'd expect something like NERC CIP to pivot from energy to pipelines. Interesting comment. Do you have any a take on that?
Unfortunately, I don't know what NERC CIP is, so I apologize, Rick.
That's a nuclear, I believe. It's the
okay.
Nuclear power regulator. So It may be, and maybe Rick wants to add some more to the comment to see, but it looks like it may be that perhaps they could pivot that way to overseeing it and ruling it. I'd love to
But
hear
but
more.
but my point once again is don't do a laser focused security. Don't only protect the pipeline industry and leave everything else out in the wind. Because as we've seen before, if it's not the pipeline industry just getting attacked, it could be the wind farm industry. It could be your water supply.
Hmm.
Everything is interconnected.
Absolutely, it's just the same thing as just typical endpoints, really. I mean, it's those hidden parts that are again that hold the connections together, which may become the weak parts. Very interesting stuff, and thank you, Rick, for that. I'd like to see more about that as well. So, going down to something a little bit more local. We picked up on a story which was written by a company that does actually manufacture keyboards and mice, as sort of full disclosure here, but that's not an issue at all because we deal with people all the time who make stuff for this business. But Dale Ludwig was a writer who said that smart keyboards might be the next frontier against insider threats. He's looking at keyboards that have a particular kind of security in terms of smart cards that allow them to get access. This could be two-factor authentication using these smart cards or contactless card readers, and maybe even being partnered with new mouse technology for sort of recognizing somebody's fingerprints by actually using the mouse. So is this, again, is this a new idea? Has this been around for a while and rejected? Is it worth a second look right now with better technologies? Is it an aha moment like, yeah, that's a really great interstitial part of the security chain? What do you think about keyboards and mice in this role?
We've tried this same thing when Microsoft integrated or tried to do the TPM model, where they would take snapshots of your RAM and check out your CPU and make sure that everything was secure upon boot. We've tried this time and time again. The problem with smart keyboards and smart mouse is that you're going to go to every laptop manufacturer, because who's using desktops anymore? So that means you need agreements with Lenovo, with Apple to build these keyboards, or your company goes out and buys a whole bunch of keyboards that nobody wants. That logistical nightmare.
Excuse me. Yeah, I imagine it would be, and I mean, again, you've also got the retro effect. I mean, if you have a computer that you're still using for a few years, it'd be a long switchover before it became active. But it's food for thought, perhaps. Many other things like cameras have been installed on computers that slowly grow into it. So it's possible it could get phased in. But if you're thinking that it wouldn't be a practical component,
it is possible that it could get phased in. But the thing about a camera is that we have several different camera manufacturers and several different specs. When you talk about smart keyboards that have specific security requirements, that's a totally different. You have to have a whole template and regulations behind it.
Very, very good. Yes. Again, I think that this was perhaps a food for thought article, but it's just interesting to see a new piece come out from left field, and perhaps that could be discussed. But those are really excellent, salient points. So let's talk about bug bounties. Do bug bounties actually help security? This is another editorial we picked up from Dark Reading, saying, are bug bounties similar to what was called the Cobra effect in India, where under British colonial rule many years ago, a bounty on actual physical cobra snakes to reduce their population resulted in residents actively breeding them to cash in. And I've heard many stories like this, even in the States with horses and so on. So even though bug bounties can't be bred in exactly the same way, the writer was considering whether bug bounties are just a way for vendors to transfer the liability of eliminating vulnerabilities in their products to bug hunters rather than doing the extensive secure design, development, and testing. So it's not that there's not a role for bug bounties, he was saying, but rather than without addressing the source that creates these, they may not be effective in reducing their number. So bottom line question for you, Jimmy, is this something that is worth sticking with? Do bug bounties still work? Are they a valuable part of our ecosystem?
Bug bounties do work, but it depends. To me, are you building your castle, or is your castle already built? If you're working on building your castle, and what's the use in having a bug bounty when you already know you need to build a moat, when you already know you need to build the walls? But if you think you have a hardened castle, you have a hard moat, then yes, a bug bounty will go and test your defenses, because then you want to know, is my security adequate? So if you're building your security, no, don't do a bug bounty. But if you're working on your security, yes, because an attacker won't wait for permission. You're getting attacked right now all the time by attackers, and they don't tell you about it. At least with a bug bounty, they'll at least tell you about the vulnerabilities that they find.
Right. So, okay. So there's a great place for it then. That's a wonderful analogy, by the way. I really like that. We also got from our producer Andrew here that NERC CIP, just for your knowledge, is the guiding regulation for the energy industry. So there we go. Live and
Thank
learn.
you, Andrew.
Yes, I know I'd heard it before, but sometimes some of these acronyms can trip over themselves, or they can be confused with other ones. So you know what? Our time is up already. I mean, I'm having such fun with you, and it's just like passed by so quickly. So, looking back over the stories that we've had, is there any here that were the most fun for you? The thumbs up, or maybe even an eye roller as to here we go, here we go
I
again.
love the dark side getting taken to hackers court one, and the smart keyboards, because the smart keyboards does enlighten you for conversation. But to me, the dark side one, you know,
That's the thing.
was a
Okay.
great one.
Yeah, that's very cool. Well, I mean, this has been an absolute delight, and I had such fun. Your wisdom is just really enlightening with your analogies. I just love that so much. So, Jimmy Sanders, CISO of Netflix DVD, I want to thank you so much for being with us today.
Hey, I really appreciate it, Andrew. It was great to be here with you.
It's a great pleasure. Take care. Thank you. So here we are at the conclusion of another one, and I want to thank also our sponsor Sumo Logic for bringing the show to you today. Just a reminder that there will be no Friday video chat tomorrow. Usually we have one on Fridays, but in reference to Memorial Day weekend, there will be no video chat tomorrow, but on June 4th, come back. We'll be doing hacking DLP, data loss prevention, and how we can manage data loss when everybody is working from home, which is still, of course, as always, a very vital component of our life right now, and will be for a while as well. So I just want to say thank you for you guys dropping in to see us here, and we will be back again next week. In the meantime, check us out every day for our 6-minute podcast, Cybersecurity Headlines, so you can learn what you need to know every day of the week. Till next week, I'll see you then. Thanks for being here.
Cybersecurity headlines are available every weekday. Head to CISOseries.com for the full stories behind the headlines.